This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
At least 30 killed in a bandit attack in Nigeria's Katsina state. We bring you the latest on the fight against the new coronavirus. And hopes rise for South Sudan's unity government as the president sends governors home. This is CGTN. Hello and welcome to Africa Live with me, Beatrice Marshall, in Nairobi. Also ahead on the program, a car maker in Nigeria joins the list of Forbes 30 under 30. And in your sports, Kenya selects its cross-country team for the upcoming Continental Championships in Lome, Togo. We begin in Nigeria, where a bandit attack has left at least 30 people dead in the northern state of Katsina. Reports indicate that about 50 bandits on motorcycles launched the onslaught, rendering many residents homeless. The latest attack comes despite Katsina state governor having granted amnesty to bandits in September of last year. Let's cross over to CGTN's Deji Badmus. He's joining us live from Lagos. Deji, what is the latest on that security situation in Katsina?
Well, Beatrice, what we're hearing is that the situation is under control now. There's calm in both communities now, both villages where this attack happened. Military deployments have been made there, but people are still asking questions as to why this attack happened in the first place after that amnesty granted by the governor sometime in September last year. And we've seen a number of attacks this year. So there's that question as to whether the amnesty granted by the government is now dead. Obviously, it's not working because, I mean, if the amnesty was working, we wouldn't have seen this attack and we wouldn't have seen the 2 or 3 attacks that we have seen this year alone. So the situation is now calm, and we understand the dead have been buried. The official death toll has not been released yet. The Commissioner of Police in the state has said his men would go after the attackers, but you know, it's something we've heard in the past. Everyone would be hoping that some arrest will be made, but so far no arrest has been made other than what the head of the police there said, that his men would go after those who carried out this attack. Beatrice?
So, Deji, so that amnesty that was granted by the governor was supposed to ease the violence there. So what do we know about the causes of this violence, and how are residents in the affected villages being assisted?
Now, let's start with the amnesty. The amnesty was supposed to be the final solution to the problem, because it was a system that was adopted in another state known as Zamfara. To some extent it worked, even though we're now beginning to see fresh attacks in those areas. Fact is that the amnesty program that the government came up with has not worked. If not, we wouldn't have seen this attack. Now, the problem, or the cause, I should say, are varied, to be candid. You have transhumance issues. You have this conflict now between herders and farmers, which of course is a problem. But you know, most of these attacks boil down to criminality. You have some kind of, you have gangs there who basically engage in basically stealing, especially rustling cattle. We understand sometimes it's a transnational gang and it's a very big business. And in an environment where you have a free flow of illicit arms, then this is what you would get. So, and then part of the problem too, the reason why we continue to have these attacks is that you just have to look at the attacks now and where they happen. Virtually all of these attacks happen in remote areas that are not easily accessible. In the case of this attack, one of the local government areas not accessible. It took a very long time before security forces could get to that point when they've got the information. And then there is no communication network. So you have little or no government presence there, no communication network, and that's the reason why this attack happened on Friday. It wasn't until late Saturday that people got to know about it. So These bandits are taking advantage of all of this now to carry out their activities, knowing that they would meet little or no resistance at all. So where you do not have government, little or no government presence now, most of these areas are ungoverned spaces. That is what these bandits are taking advantage of. Most of the attacks that we've seen, banditry attacks now that we've seen across the north of the country, usually happen in these remote locations that are very difficult to access, and usually by the time the security forces get there, these guys would have done the damage and they would have scampered away. So these are basically issues that would need to be addressed by the government. People have talked about the need for community policing. We're waiting to see what the government does with that. It's something the government is considering seriously, but we just have to wait and see what the government actually does with the issue of community policing, Beatrice.
All right, Deji Badmus joining us there from Lagos. And now to the latest on the coronavirus outbreak. In China, the total number of confirmed cases has surpassed 68,000. The death toll has reached over 1,600, while over 9,000 people have recovered. Hubei province has the majority of confirmed cases in China, more than 56,000 so far. 70% are in the provincial capital Wuhan, where the virus originated. A good sign is that the number of new confirmed cases across China has declined for 3 consecutive days. Guangdong, Sichuan, Henan and Hunan provinces are the most affected areas outside Hubei, with each reporting more than 1,000 cases. Beijing has reported 380 cases and Shanghai 328. The virus has spread to 25 other countries, which have reported more than 600 cases. The Philippines, Japan and France have each reported 1 death, while 70 more cases have been confirmed on the cruise ship in Japan's Yokohama city, bringing that total to 355, the single largest number outside China. The Japanese government has decided to test all the people on board. About 3,000 have been in quarantine there for almost 2 weeks. Well, China is adopting multiple approaches to fast-track the development of effective treatments for the coronavirus epidemic. Several antiviral drugs are already undergoing clinical trials and possible vaccines are being tested. CGTN's Yu Hang has more.
A glimmer of hope in the battle against the coronavirus as Chinese scientists race against the time to find an effective treatment.
We've made progress in the 5 major areas. We've excluded the disease from any relationship with some of the known domestic animals. It's been suggested that bats are the most likely source of the new coronavirus.
More than 4,800 animal samples, including pigs, poultry and dogs, have tested negative, and scientists have found that bats are the most likely natural host of the disease. Meanwhile, animal models infected by the virus include mice and monkeys, granting scientists the conditions to evaluate the safety of drugs and vaccines. And 7 different types of testing kits have already been approved for market.
The researchers scanned more than 70,000 drugs or compounds through computer simulations and in vitro enzyme activity tests, and selected 5,000 potentially effective drug candidates.
The drugs have undergone rigorous testing. 100 of them have been chosen for further evaluation. Some will then be chosen to undergo clinical trials. Experts say the country has multiple approaches to fast-track the development of a vaccine. Candidate vaccines have started animal testing. In the treatment of severe cases, Chinese experts say recovered patients produce antibodies in their blood plasma. Extracting these has been shown to effectively cure severely ill patients.
4 critically ill patients in Wuhan Jinyintan Hospital have received convalescent plasma treatment, and all of the patients have shown improved clinical symptoms about 12 to 24 hours after they received the treatment.
The expert is calling on recovered patients to donate plasma at hospitals. Meanwhile, the Chinese government has also called on people from all walks of life to come forward with ideas to develop new drugs. Chinese President Xi Jinping has said no matter what a person's background is, the country will support him in finding ways to fight against the coronavirus if he has the ability to do so. And China's Ministry of Science and Technology is serving this end, by making it easier for people to provide ideas and solutions for the treatment of the epidemic. Yu Yang, CGTN.
ECOWAS health ministers held a meeting in Mali to discuss the COVID-19 outbreak. The ministers discussed in Bamako the need for member states to strengthen coordination. Several measures have been adopted, including strengthening surveillance at entry points, as well as increasing the capacity of member states to manage potential cases of COVID-19. Well, the novel coronavirus has disrupted the lives of millions of Chinese nationals back home and overseas since the outbreak. CGTN's Robert Nagila caught up with one Chinese national in Kenya who has been personally affected by the epidemic back home and forced to postpone her travel plans as Chinese authorities race to bring the epidemic under control.
Monitoring the latest news on the novel coronavirus outbreak in China from the apartment in Nairobi has become a daily routine for the Ji family.
While watching the news, I feel that though my country is experiencing this epidemic, the government and leaders are taking it seriously. I feel proud to be Chinese.
Wang Ling flew into Kenya on November 11th, 3 weeks before the virus outbreak, to celebrate the Chinese Spring Festival with her daughter and her family. She was supposed to return in February, but the outbreak forced her to change her travel plans.
My hometown, Wuhan, is the epicenter. I had to postpone my travel plans. All my relatives are in Wuhan. I am very worried for them. I have extended my stay and will go back after the outbreak.
Wang calls home daily and remains in constant communication with relatives online. But like so many others back home, she too has been personally affected.
One of my distant relatives passed away after the virus infected her. She was almost 60 years old. I am heartbroken and worry about my relatives.
For her grandchildren, having their grandmother over for an extended period of time has been a blessing. Oblivious of the extent of the epidemic back home, they're just happy to spend time with her, and so is her daughter. But the G's did not just sit back helplessly as the virus spread.
And purchase.
Like many other Chinese nationals overseas, they immediately swung into action. Her son-in-law, Li Ji, a businessman in Nairobi, donated masks and goggles to be used back home fighting the epidemic.
We are going to the manufacturer to take the goggles with this kind of N95 mask to Southern Airlines, China. And then after that, we are going to donate these boxes.
I really want to thank my son-in-law after being aware of the epidemic in Hubei province. He told me, I am a son-in-law of this province and I will do something for this place. And he donated masks to Hubei Red Cross.
It is that bold spirit that has brought out the best in Chinese nationals globally in the face of this devastating epidemic. Meanwhile, Wang hopes the virus will be brought under control soon so that she can return home and help where she can. Robert Nagila, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
As China battles to contain the coronavirus, Africa's most popular city and Nigeria's commercial capital, Lagos, says it is putting measures in place to check any outbreak of the virus there. CGTN's Deji Badmus spoke with the city's Commissioner of Health about the measures being put in place, as well as his assessment of China's efforts to contain the virus.
We've been building infrastructure, we've been training personnel, and we've been developing operational systems and protocols. So since Ebola, we've had a number of events, although minor, but they've still been biological threats to the city of Lagos. And so we come to this scenario where it's almost similar to the Ebola scenario in that we know that there is an outbreak somewhere else, and we know that there is a reasonable risk that it will enter Lagos. In this case, we have lots of Nigerians that trade in China, and we have lots of Chinese citizens that come and do business in Lagos or Nigeria. And if they're coming to Nigeria, they would come through one of two ports, either Lagos or Abuja. So there's a significant potential that we will see an entry. So what we've been doing is just fine-tuning all these systems that I just described to make sure that we're in a state of readiness.
What do you make of China's response to the coronavirus so far?
Well, it's quite impressive. It starts with, from the period where their surveillance picked up that there was something unusual going on. There was an excess of a number of flu-like illnesses which didn't fit the diagnostic criteria of flu. So they did a number of tests and nothing was being picked up. So the suspicion that we're dealing with a new pathogen was increasing. But it didn't take long for them to perform some genomic analysis and identify that this was a novel pathogen or a new pathogen, and it was characterized very quickly. So our colleagues in China were very fast off the mark to identify quickly that we're dealing with an agent X, X being unknown, but within a couple of weeks, X was identified as a corona strain. So that's impressive, and then subsequently, the response to the outbreak, I think this is a highly contagious pathogen. So it obviously spread very quickly, and you're having exponentially increasing numbers of cases daily. I think any country in the world would be broken under those kinds of circumstances, but China seems to be, coping, and, lots of kudos to the government of China and my colleagues there, and of course the logistics that's required. It's impressive that they could contain the whole area, which would obviously slow down the movement of people with the pathogen, and that would have an effect globally as well. So the fact that China was containing the region has slowed down its spread to the rest of China, from the rest of China to the rest of the world.
Well, citizens across Africa have a wide range of thoughts on the COVID-19 outbreak. We went to Tanzania, Zimbabwe, and Egypt to see what they had to say about it. Take a listen.
I will protect myself as they do, by wearing masks, washing hands. If you meet someone new, don't shake hands.
What I've heard is that this disease is scary and it's dangerous for all humans.
As we see the Chinese wearing masks, they cover mouths so that the infected do not infect others.
I heard about the disease on television and radio. They say it's like flu.
This is a global village. All the people are traveling in and out of their countries to China. We know that China right now is the main hub where people they do shopping and all sort of things. But we are not protected from this virus because we know that we are in the third country as well. So being in the third world, we are so vulnerable to the diseases which are coming from these other countries.
I think the main thing that should be done is the screenings in every border, even at the airports. They should do major screenings, or even before the people come inside into the country. They should do proper screening, and however, reach out to different communities in the streets, through social media and all those platforms, so people get to know what's going on out there, because a lot of people out there don't really know that the coronavirus is really there and it's airborne. So as we have a lot of visitors coming inside the country, you'd want people to be aware. Awareness is key. People should get to know what's going on.
I'm reading about the preparations and it seems to be okay. That was clear during the arrival of the 300 Egyptian students who came back from China. They had a good facility ready, and it's where they are staying.
Well, the World Health Organization has been working with African governments in the wake of the COVID-19 outbreak. Earlier, we talked to Dr. Michael Yao, the World Health Organization's Emergency Operations Program Manager for Africa, who gave us his thoughts on China's efforts to combat the outbreak.
We are planning to do so, but it's going slowly because it's a new virus, and it took time for the laboratory to manufacture. And of course, countries where this is manufactured, they are also in need because they need also to have some reagents. So we are working hard to ensure that we can mobilize some quantity to support African countries. So as we are speaking, we have 18 countries that can perform and confirm the tests. There is training that was done with some of the technical experts in Senegal last week, and next week we will have the same training in South Africa for about 17 countries to ensure that they can perform the test with high quality and trust in the result. I think measure put in place in China actually is protecting many countries outside. Because ensuring that people around the epicenter have could not move outside without proper checking, it helped a lot. And we think is why maybe probably one of the reasons that Africa is not yet contaminated, because maybe most of the people coming in Africa are not from the same area, or people that could be sick are still in China. They have not traveled yet in Africa. So this measure was critical in terms of do so.
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there. To see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you, all around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London, China Global Television Network. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
Well, let's now go to South Sudan, where the country's President Salva Kiir has, in an unexpected decision, relieved all 32 state governors of their duties. The move follows a presidency meeting held in Juba that decided to return the country to its original 10 states plus 3 administrative areas. In another presidential decree, President Kiir also removed all the other constitutional post holders in the 32 states, except for members of the state legislatures. Let's now get more from our correspondent, Patrick Oyet. He's joining us live from Juba. Patrick, an unexpected decision there. All governors are sent packing. Tell us more on how this helps the peace process.
This helped the peace process a lot, Beatrice, because one, this was a key demand of the opposition groups who were saying that President Kiir was actually offering states to his supporters in return for votes that are scheduled to be held at the end of the transitional period. Now that he has reverted the country back to 10 states, it therefore moves the peace process forward. You would expect the opposition group now not to complain as far as the issue of the number of states is concerned. Now that he has also gone ahead and sacked the former 32 governors of the former 32 states, it also gives the opposition groups now opportunity to submit in names of those they want to be appointed as governors, because remember, there is a power sharing deal where all the political groups in the country are supposed to have shares, even in the state. So this again gives them opportunity now to submit in names of the people they want to be appointed governors for the shares that they are going to be taking. Remember, there was enormous pressure on President Salva Kiir, especially when opposition group had already moved from their position of 21, especially those led by Dr. Riek Machar, to 23 plus 1 states, and President Salva Kiir was stuck on 32. The members of international community were looking at President Salva Kiir as being intransigent, and even the members of IGAD, even special envoys who were created to South Sudan. So now with this move, the peace process therefore could move forward. Formation of the government is scheduled to take place next Saturday. So everybody here in South Sudan is hoping that now the process will move forward.
So, Patrick, the process of a new government is supposed to take shape next Saturday, but what remains to be done for the unity government to take shape?
Yeah, there are still pending issues. Number one is the issue of security sector reforms. In the peace agreement of 2018, it is stated that, for example, the forces that have been fighting each other should be reunited, retrained, and then redeployed. This has not taken place. So this is one of the issues opposition are most likely to raise. But given the time remaining now, 5 days to the formation of the government, it looks unlikely that that will be achieved. The problem has been, according to President Salva Kiir's government, lack of money that did not allow them to do all these things on time. They are saying now any pending issues should now be resolved by the would-be unity government. Another issue is, of course, connected to security sector reform is the issue of deployment of the regional protection forces. The opposition were advocating that all the urban centers in South Sudan should be actually occupied by the regional protection forces. The armies of the government and the opposition should go to the barracks, and also the routes coming to South Sudan from other countries also should be occupied by the regional protection force from the UN. This has also not taken place. So these are some of the pending issues. But of course, as I said, the government is saying now let them form the new government, and the new government will resolve some of those issues that are not yet resolved.
All right, Patrick Oyet joining us there from Juba with our update on South Sudan's unity government. Thank you. You're watching Africa Live. Still ahead on the program. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo in Senegal as he begins a tour of African states. And Libya's UN-backed Prime Minister Serraj warns of a financial crisis because of an oil blockade by a rival Haftar.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Multiple rockets have reportedly hit near the U.S. Embassy in Iraq's capital, Baghdad. According to news agency AFP, the early Sunday assault sent warning sirens blaring across the high-security diplomatic compound. The news agency also says its correspondents heard multiple strong explosions. This was followed by aircraft circling near the Green Zone, the high-security enclave where the U.S. Embassy is located. It is the 19th attack against U.S. assets in Iraq since late October. Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is currently on a 3-day official visit in Senegal. It is his first visit as the Secretary of State to Sub-Saharan Africa. Pompeo is set to meet Senegalese President Macky Sall. A talk on security ties and economic cooperation will be top on the agenda for the two leaders. The visit comes just 3 weeks after France warned the U.S. against possible American troop cuts in West Africa. Pompeo is also scheduled to visit Angola, Ethiopia, Saudi Arabia, and Oman. Let's now turn to international defense issues at the 56th Munich Security Conference in Germany. The summit in Munich began on February the 14th and will end today, February the 16th. Attendees will also be tackling the implications of the Wuhan coronavirus outbreak and the U.S. actions in the Middle East. Well, let's get more now from our correspondent, Natalie Carney. She's joining us live from Munich. Natalie, what is coming out from the Munich security meeting?
Well, as with every year, there's lots to be discussed at these meetings with over 500 heads of state, policymakers, decision makers, and international organizations convening here in Munich for this annual conference. On the first day, we saw from the opening statement of the conference chairman, Wolfgang Ischinger, scathing remarks at the international community for what he called unforgivable failures for the crisis in Syria. We also saw the first phase of a peace plan confirmed between the U.S. government as well as the Afghan Taliban, which would see a ceasefire of over 7 days in the next 7 days, followed by an all-inclusive beginning of Afghan peace talks. Yesterday, day 2, Saturday here in Munich, we heard from U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, who lashed out at Chinese-backed telecoms companies, calling them Trojan dragons for the Chinese intelligence. Then we heard a speech from the Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi, who stepped up saying, basically dismissing Pompeo's comments, calling them all lies and fictitious. Mr. Wang went on to discuss the coronavirus outbreak and thanking the international community, the 100 plus heads of state and international organizations that have offered their hand to help and offered their support to China to help them in this battle against this deadly virus. The WHO head as well also spoke in regards to the virus, saying that the world needs to put more money into finding a solution to the crisis, saying, you know, we're spending so much money to try to fight terrorism, but we're doing nothing really to try to fight the future, the next deadly epidemic, which could be far more catastrophic than any terrorist attack.
Natalie, let's look at some African issues for a moment, because Libya has been headlining for the last couple of years now, and there was to be a meeting on the sidelines about the security situation in Libya. What do you know about that?
Yes, well, we know that on Friday there was a roundtable convened with some members to discuss the situation in Libya. But what's more important is the meeting that's actually taking place right now. We have about a dozen foreign ministers and representatives of the international community meeting with the German foreign minister Heiko Maas and the Libyan special envoy for the UN, Hassan Salami, who are discussing the 55-point roadmap that was developed in Berlin, of course, last month, and how we can further implement that peace plan. Of course, there's been lots of criticism going around that both sides in the conflict in Libya are not taking any further measures to try to bring about peace. There's been a lot of criticism, particularly from the UN envoy himself, towards other countries meddling in Libya's affairs. In fact, Hassan Salami has even said, take your hands off of Libya, giving either side any hope is really going to disturb any political solution in the country. So we are about to get to a press conference to follow that meeting, so we'll give you more information as to what comes from that later on.
All right, Natalie Carney joining us there from Munich. Thank you for your update. Meanwhile, Libya is staring at a financial crisis and a budget deficit in 2020. The country's UN-backed Prime Minister Fayez El-Sarraj attributes the looming crisis to a blockade of oil terminals by groups loyal to Eastern Commander Khalifa Haftar. The North African country's oil output has fallen sharply since the 18th of January, when the blockade started. Blockade is part of a conflict between forces loyal to Khalifa Haftar and rival forces aligned with the internationally recognized government in the capital, Tripoli.
Certainly, the shutting down of oil production, which is one of the main sources of revenue for the Libyans, will lead to a crisis on many levels. There will be a shortage in the budget. This shortage will take its toll on the salaries and fuel subsidies. So it seems that, unfortunately, those responsible for these idiotic actions are unaware or do not know the consequences. For this reason, we address this message to all the parties responsible for this shutdown. They must be aware of the dangers. This does not only relate to the government of national accord, but relates to all 7 million Libyans throughout the whole country. The matter is simple and clear. If firm international measures are not taken in order to stop these violations, things will become more extreme. We are aware of this, we are careful, and we will respond.
And your business news coming up next. Here's what's ahead. More on Ethiopia's Grand Dam. Talks between Egypt, Sudan and Ethiopia falter in Washington, D.C. And a cake maker in Nigeria joins a list of Forbes 30 under 30.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Let's start your business with the latest on Ethiopia's Grand Dam. Egypt, Sudan and Ethiopia have concluded another round of talks in Washington, D.C. concerning the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. The host of the negotiations, the U.S. Department of Treasury, says the ministers continued their discussions on the remaining issues necessary for a final agreement. But Ethiopia is, however, hinting that no agreement has been reached. Here's Adel Mahroui with that story.
After finalizing what has been dubbed as the final round of talks, delegations from Egypt, Sudan and Ethiopia leave the U.S. capital signing no deal. Following the meetings, a statement from Egypt did not mention any obstacles in the discussions. The Egyptian Foreign Ministry says the three nations have resumed discussing all remaining aspects in the Grand Ethiopia Renaissance Dam. According to Cairo, all remaining issues were negotiated, including the details of filling the reservoir in drought and regular seasons, the long-term operation of the dam during normal hydraulic conditions, and a coordination platform that will follow up the implementation of a deal. Guidelines relating to safety of the dam and measures taken during emergencies, in addition to a binding mechanism to resolve disputes over the comprehension of the terms of agreement. The joint statement from the US and the World Bank, however, didn't mention any agreement on these issues. It said, quote, "The United States, with technical support from the World Bank, has agreed to facilitate the preparation of the final agreement for consideration by ministers and heads of states for conclusion by the end of the month." It is clear now that the document the U.S. Department of Treasury is working on does not enjoy consensus from Egypt, Sudan or Ethiopia. It will probably go through numerous amendments before getting signed, if approved at all. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Well, Ethiopian officials say they are undertaking studies to fully understand the tripartite Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam agreements before signing them. Ethiopia says the recent talks were concluded with no agreement. Here's CGTN's Girum Chala from Addis Ababa.
The U.S. government and World Bank mediated dam talks between Ethiopia, Egypt and Sudan seem to be stalled again. According to Ethiopia's ambassador to the United States, Fitsum Arega, the latest round of negotiations held in Washington, D.C. were robbed with no tangible results. The three parties had previously agreed in their preliminary accord to fill the $4+ billion dam during the rainy season, phase by phase. At the same time, there were assignments left for all sides to ink a comprehensive agreement on the general filling and operation management of this dam. Still, no defined agreement so far. Ethiopia's Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed was recently heard saying he has halted any agreements that would be signed to make sure there is a detailed understanding of the matter at hand. Him and his foreign and water ministers believe there's no rush to sign a deal at this moment. According to analysts, the priority for Ethiopia is to ensure there is an equitable usage of the Nile water and little or no harm should be incurred by the Nile basin countries while utilizing the potentials of the water. For now, no one knows when the tripartite Renaissance Dam deal will be signed. Grumjala CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
A cake maker in Nigeria is garnering international recognition for her exceptional baking skills. She has trained hundreds in the art and has been listed as one of Forbes 30 under 30. Here's CGTN's Deji Badmos with her story.
To create an eye-catching, mouth-watering cakes that she's popularly known for, Barbara Ndubu first sketches the cake on paper. For her, cake making is an art, and must be handled like every art piece. It's part of what sets her apart from every other baker in her line of business. When the design is right, she gets to work by mixing butter, eggs, flour and other ingredients. After letting it cool for about 2 hours, Barbara decorates the cake with fruits and chocolates. What also stands her out is her unique cake designs and artistry. She goes all out to deliver 3D cakes that exceed the expectations of her clients.
Firstly, the customer tells us what they want. Depends on who they are ordering the cake for. So it's left for us to think out or to think about what, is going to fit the customer's specifications they have given us. And then when we do that, we go back to the drawing board and start trying to figure out how we're going to arrive at what the customer wants. For cakes like the stadium cake, we go and get the actual picture of the stadium in real life and then pick up colors, size, and then start baking and decorating.
Barbara's skills have made her cake some of the most sought after in Nigeria. And beyond the country, she's earning international recognition.
During 2019, I was nominated for Forbes Africa. I just felt I hadn't gotten to that stage. So they made us understand that it wasn't about what you had. It wasn't about your financial, Yes, it was about the impact you have made or how far you've gone in your craft and how many years it took you to get there. So they asked for some certain documentations like financial statements, how many staff you have, pictures of your work, where you see yourself in 10 years. So I submitted it. So after we did all that, I was nominated. I was listed on Forbes 30 under 30 Africa.
Baking cake was actually not so much in Barbara's plan at inception. She has a degree in electrical engineering and an MSc in oil and gas management. But she had to make a career switch from the sciences when she couldn't get a job after school. She now advises graduates who are unemployed to focus more on their skills than certificates.
Develop yourself and not wait for, the government or, people, family to put food on your table or to tell you what to do. You go out there, look for a skill, just push yourself and make sure you develop a skill that could help you set up a business and just keep pushing.
It's been 4 years now since she set up her Oven Secret Bakery. Barbara has trained over 300 persons in her craft and aims to train even more. She also hopes to get more recognition and investment for her cake-making business. Deji Badmos, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
Now, Robben Island is one of South Africa's top tourist destinations, which was once the notorious prison island to which Nelson Mandela was banished for 18 of his 27 years behind bars. Over the years, it's become tradition for couples to flock to the old Garrison Church on Robben Island on Valentine's Day. This year marked the 20th anniversary on the romantic mass wedding event. Here's CGTN's Renee Delcam with more.
Nearly 333 couples, 20 years and one island. Robben Island, once a place of banishment and imprisonment, turns into a love island once a year when it hosts a mass wedding event on Valentine's Day. 327 couples have tied the knot on the island since the year 2000. And this year, 19 couples decided to take the ferry ride from Cape Town to Robben Island to take the plunge and say, I do.
For richer, for poor, until death do you part.
I will certainly do. Oh yes, I do.
I do. Visually impaired couple Frankfurt Williams and Cindy Mullins became South Africa's first couple to receive a marriage certificate in Braille, while the country's Minister of Home Affairs reminded all the lovebirds that marriage was a lifelong commitment and offered them a few words of advice.
Never marry a person you can live with, but marry a person you cannot live without.
One after another, the newlyweds declared their undying love and their excitement about getting married on the iconic, historic Robben Island.
Today, I feel like the luckiest girl because I feel like I'm getting the best Valentine's Day gift ever, my husband.
Nelson Mandela is one of my personal icons, so it's nice to actually get married here, and actually a positive thing is starting for us here on the island, and that's so special, man. And I mean, this wasn't planned, but it's amazing, man.
I just want to tell anybody, if you want to dream, you want to get married here, it can be possible. It's amazing, really. Anyone can get married here.
The mass weddings on Robben Island is a government initiative which was started at the beginning of the new millennium. It's aimed at giving couples the opportunity to take their relationships beyond romance and become part of South African history.
Brenna Dalcom, CGTN, off Robben Island, near Cape Town, South Africa.
And congratulations to all. Let's now take a look at your sports news. Here's what's ahead. Kenya selects its cross-country team for the upcoming Continental Championships in Lomé, Togo.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arena.